And the White House has thrown one of its biggest ever state dinners to honour the Kenyan President William Ruto, who's on a state visit to the US. President Biden hopes to further US interests and to counter growing Russian and Chinese influence in the country.
The first African leader on a state visit to Washington in 16 years. William Ruto's trip is a sign of growing importance of the continent, home to more than 1 billion people. Kenya has long been one of the United States' most important allies in Africa, and its status is about to get even higher.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please have a seat. I'm proud to announce we're working with Congress to designate Kenya a major non-NATO ally. That's a fulfillment of years of collaboration.
Ruto's visit is being closely watched back home, in a region hit by political turmoil. The US and Kenya may be divided by distance, but their leaders say they are united by their values.
My visit takes place at a time when democracy is perceived to be retreating worldwide. The accelerating drift towards regimes indifferent to democratic values is a deep concern to us, and I believe it is time the US, working with Kenya, deploys its capabilities and rally like-minded democratic countries to set up the course for democracy.
Democracy has been on the decline in Africa. In the past year, military coups, wars and marred elections brought to power politicians looking for closer ties with Russia and China. The US wants to advance its interests in countries like Kenya, but to do so, it first needs to decrease Africa's financial dependence on Beijing.
So today we're launching what we're calling the Nairobi Washington Vision. This initiative is going to bring together international financial institutions and nations from all around the world to mobilize more resources for countries saddled with debt, to open more opportunities to the private sector financing, and to promote transparent, sustainable and affordable lending practices.
This is just one of the deals Kenya's president will be taking home after meeting the top brass in Washington. As the US says it's offering a democratic alternative to relations with Russia and China, his visit may present a chance to turn the tide on the continent.
Distinguished guests, please.
I discussed the visit with our correspondents Janelle Dumoulin in Washington and Felix Moringa in Nairobi and asked about the outcome.
Yes, he did. The US had promised that it will increase investment in Kenya, and companies like Coca-Cola have promised to invest billions of dollars in the country over the next 5 years, and that will end up creating over 3,000 jobs. Microsoft has also committed to creating a data hub within the region, which will increase Kenya's positioning as a digital powerhouse within the region. Other areas of increased investments include areas in health, security, and Kenya will also be gaining in the area of infrastructure, where the longest toll road between Nairobi and Mombasa will be built to a tune of over 474 billion, which will be the longest toll road in Africa. Other areas that Kenya has gained has been in terms of elections, where the US has said that it will be helping Kenya fund electoral reforms ahead of Kenya's 2027 general election. Okay. So has he gained anything? Quite a lot to bring home.
Thanks. Janelle Dumoulin, tell us more about what Washington wants in exchange for all this generosity.
Well, indeed, one of the defining characteristics of a state visit, of course, is that they are outcomes unto themselves. Joe Biden really wants to show that there's renewed momentum in U.S.-Kenyan relations after a period of, let's call it, relative inattentiveness as the conflicts in the Middle East and Europe took center stage. But precisely because of those ongoing multi-theater conflicts, the White House is really looking for relationships with emerging countries that would help ensure against some measure of economic and geopolitical instability. So in Kenya, Washington sees a strong security partner in the region. It also wants to designate Kenya as a non-NATO ally in the region. But beyond that, emerging countries like Kenya are also going to be crucial to securing supply chains in strategic sectors like semiconductors. A country like Kenya has a young population, has manufacturing capabilities, and it has natural resources. And what really Washington wants is to be able to have a democratic partner in Kenya in securing those vital supply chains, making sure that the supply chains that go through Africa are at least in part controlled by a democratic partner, especially at a time when the U.S. finds itself locked in a great power game with autocratic countries like Russia and China.
But why should any African leader believe a Washington promise when they have been so inconsistent? I can remember the Obama administration waking up to the so-called threat of Chinese influence in Africa and calling a big summit of African leaders back in 2014. Then it all went quiet. So why would this latest bunch of promises be any more productive?
That's a really fair question. And, it does remain to be seen whether it will be productive or not. One can speculate one or the other way. And a lot of it, I guess, will also depend on whether Joe Biden makes the visit the other way, meaning whether he goes to Kenya to show that he really is serious about taking advantage of this renewed momentum in U.S.-Kenyan relations. But I think it's also worth taking a step back and noting that China's Belt and Road program, this program that provides cheap loans, especially for infrastructure in Africa and Asia. We've seen more than a decade of that program, and countries are now at a stage where they're really having to balance investing nationally in their own countries with servicing their ballooning debts to China. And the difficulty of managing that balance is where Washington is seeing an opening. There is this thought here in Washington that there is a bit of China fatigue setting in, and that is an opening to be taken advantage of.
And Felix Moringa in Nairobi, what's the feeling there about America's inconsistent interest in the continent?
Well, people are saying that it's more of a wait-and-see situation because in 2022, President Joe Biden promised there will be massive investment towards Africa. That is what William Ruto has bagged. He also promised in 2022 during the Africa-US Summit that there will be a lot of integration when it comes to peace and security. And with what Kenya has already bagged and the advancement in artillery and now becoming a non-NATO ally, then it looks like the US is actually very keen on implementing their commitment towards their partnership and relation and staying true to their promise in Africa and Kenya.
OK, this time we mean it. Felix Moringa in Nairobi, thank you so much. Janelle Dumoulin in Washington, thank you as well.